And not to be overlooked is the gendered dimension. Women are frequently disproportionately affected by colonial systems as well. For instance, Palestinian women endure the psychological toll of keeping families together during occupation, in addition to checkpoints and surveillance.
And women already go through enough in our culture, seeing as they're not, like, supposed to be the woman that takes care of the house, usually in our culture, but they're still valued very highly. So that high standard on top of the oppression they get from the Israeli checkpoints is obviously very damaging. And he had a strong argument. For example, in the 1970 book of Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Paulo makes the case that oppressed people internalize their narratives that their oppressors force onto them. And this reminds me of that. Reclaiming that narrative is exemplified by Palestinian women's activism, art, and education in opposition to it. Also, the Israeli military has stepped up roadblocks throughout the occupied West Bank since October 7th. They have even compelled Palestinian moms to give birth while traveling, and they cause protracted delays. The story is told in the video that we'll watch right now.
Here is the video.
Trying to get to a hospital, a closed Israeli military checkpoint stood in their way. Trapped, Ilham turned the car into a delivery room.
I delivered the baby, but the umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck, so I cut it and gave him to his mom to hold.
I
Just like to pause it real quick here and explain that what I've noticed is that if this were to happen to any other ethnicity or race, specifically Caucasian, then I feel like it would make larger news.
Exactly.
If a white woman had to give birth in her car from being stopped at a Palestinian checkpoint, that would be global news.
Exactly. I totally
But
agree.
because of oppression, like it gets silenced, and this kind of stuff just seems as like common, like
Exactly.
it's a poor thing that happens to them. Not too many people take action, and the most we can do is share it because we're stuck just watching this happen.
was embarrassed. A lot of men were around me, but my fear for the baby was stronger. My oxygen levels were dropping, and I didn't want to lose him.
This was not Ilham's first checkpoint delivery.
It was during the second Palestinian Intifada. A woman was in a car shouting. I delivered the baby, but I can't remember if it was a boy or a girl.
Both the mother and baby Shamikh are in good health. But not every story has a positive end. Rula Shteye shows us her daughter's birth certificate. Next to it, a death certificate on the same day in 2003. Along with her husband Dawood, Rula remembers their fear at this Israeli checkpoint, a few minutes' drive from their home in Burin in the north of the occupied West Bank. Soldiers asked her to sit quietly. The 8-month pregnant lady was anything but that. She started shouting, "I gave birth," followed by silence and another shout, "I think she died."
When I wrapped her and I held her to my chest, I said, "She's most likely dead." She started turning blue, but I wasn't sure. I had hope that she would still be alive.
Baby Mira lived and died at the checkpoint.
I had to cut the umbilical cord with 2 stones. Then they allowed me to take her to the hospital.
3 years later, the couple had another daughter. They named her Mira, too.
For many Palestinian women, the journey to motherhood is not always a joyous occasion, but comes with difficulties and obstacles. Just a few hours ago, the Israeli military installed this gate at the entrance to the village. Mothers about to give birth and needing to go to the hospital might not know which gate is open and which one is closed.
It was a total closure when 20-year-old Qassam Bakr was born in 2003. He's not sure exactly where, but thinks it's around this area. There was an Israeli checkpoint here, now removed.
I had hoped to be the last child to be born at a checkpoint. Look at us now, 20 years later. We hear stories we know too well.
His wish is not happening. with baby
Common misconception is that all this started in October, like on October 7th, but really this has been going on for decades, stretching back as far as 1948.
Shamikh being the
And sorry, I would just like to add on that. And that also shows how the media really doesn't push this enough, you know? This has been going on way before, and just now it's being pushed, you know? And that has to do with several factors, which no one really fully knows, but it could be, you know, media control and biases.
the last baby we know of born at a checkpoint. Shamikh means standing tall. One day his family hopes he will live up to his name and walk freely in a land with no checkpoints. Nida Ibrahim, Al Jazeera, the occupied West Bank.
Make sure to
That was it for the video.
Yeah. All right. So after that clip that you just witnessed, I'd like to say that this has a strong connection to the colonial and resistance related topics that we were just talking about. This is also in line with Quijano's theory of colonial systems that endure outside of direct occupation. The first-hand narratives emphasize the daily reality of checkpoints, house demolitions, and cultural erasure. Through art, education, and international solidarity, Palestinians are recovering their voices in this source, which highlights resilience. Because it informs viewers about systematic injustice and gives them the ability to take action. It echoes Oaxaca's grassroots media resistance. This is for our next segment, media as resistance in Oaxaca and Palestine. Building on.
All right, so let's look at how media has been used as a tool of resistance. For example, in Oaxaca during the 2006 protest, indigenous women occupied Channel 9, the state-run TV station. After being silenced by mainstream media and several other sources. One woman said, "We had to take over the station to be heard." That was quoted by her. Showing how reclaiming media can challenge, this shows how reclaiming media can challenge power structures.
And this reminds me of a similar conflict in Palestine. The media is tightly controlled, and the story is usually skewed in favor of the occupiers. Nonetheless, the world has been made aware of the horrors of life under occupation, thanks in large part to independent journalists and grassroots media organizations.
So, of course, Palestinians have been able to get beyond the control of traditional media by using social media sites like Instagram, you know, Twitter, Snapchat, TikTok, you know, it's been getting there. Its digital resistance is a global version of what transpired in Oaxaca. And the distributing trend of social media propaganda, trivializing Palestinian persecution, is examined in Al Jazeera documentary. And we will play the video shortly, right now. Here's the video, a very short clip. And here, I just to pause, just to clarify, just in case, you know, you guys may be lost. These videos are of the Israeli, you know, some citizens, and not to say all citizens are bad.
I was about to say, yeah.
Yeah, not to say all citizens are bad, but most of them here are just mocking, you know, the Palestinians and all of this, which, like, this shows how much of the fact that, you know, our suffering is like nothing in a way, if that makes sense.
And this isn't entirely due to them just believing that the Palestinian struggle isn't worth talking about. This is in part to the government that is like feeding them the propaganda that and dehumanizing the Palestinian people.
Exactly.
Making them seem less than human, and that this kind of behavior is okay, because with a government that informs its people and keeps them educated, stuff like this would never happen. Let's go. step.
Yeah. I would like to pause here and actually really go in on this pretty briefly. So we just saw earlier that these mockeries that are going on TikTok, when reported, nothing really happened as much. But when Palestinians media and were reported, we see that it gets banned.
Even when it's not reported, it gets taken down.
Exactly. And this goes to show that sometimes like our saying has like little meaning and impact due to media biases.
And the kill count that's confirmed is only what they can identify. Most of the time, it's unidentifiable corpses and bodies, so the estimated kill count is a lot higher than what is reported most of the time. And this is not to put hate on any Israelis or any Jewish individuals. This is just to inform of the extreme side. There are still many Israeli individuals that side with the Palestinians.
So we're back. So that video we just watched, this relates to Quijano's coloniality of power. This is highlighted by this pattern, which shows how the media may uphold hierarchies by degrading the subjugated, which in this case would be the Palestinians. The film criticizes the ways in which digital platforms, which are frequently employed for resistance, can be appropriated to support the damaging narratives by promoting critical thought about how the media shapes views, and on the other hand, emphasizes the significance of reclaiming these platforms, and is consistent with Freire's idea, which is also significant with Freire's idea of conscientization. Our podcast gains depth from the study, which highlights the media's dual role in the fight for justice.
Building on is a concept of a conscientization. Wow, it's hard to say. Conscientization. I wrote this. Conscientization, which involves educating and communicating oppressed populations to increase their awareness. Even when the oppressor tries to stifle the truth, social media turns into a classroom. A powerful illustration of the use of media as a tool for resistance can be found in the Al Jazeera video. Creator of viral boycott video talks about helping Palestinian cause, which we'll play right now.
Come on.
Some civilians nearby. Do it.
كنا نتفرج على الفيديوهات والمشاهد المؤلمة والدمار اللي صاير، فحسينا ان احنا مقصرين بشدة في واجبنا باتجاه هذه القضية. من واجبي كصانع محتوى اني ندير حاجة تحرك مشاعر الناس باتجاه القضية وتأثر فيهم بشكل كويس. فطلعنا أكثر من أفكار، وكانت واحدة من الأفكار هذه فكرة الفلوس، كيف يتحركوا من يعني مبالغ بسيطة لين تلقى روحك قاتل فلسطيني. تفكيري في الحياة كلها تغير من يوم هذاك. حسيت ان الرفاهية اللي انا عايشها في حياتي كلها هم يدفعوا في ثمنها، فحسيت ان ضروري في شيء يتغير. لو السلام هذا ما صارش على يعني هم تو اللي يديروا فيه تو في اخوتنا في اهل غزه، ما عادش في حاجه اسمها سلام. هم مستعدين يقتلوا اكثر عدد منا. من الافضل انك انت تتباعد على المنتجات اللي جايه من برا وتدير منتجاتك المحليه الخاصه بك وتكون معتمد على نفسك في الحاجات هي.
The creator talks about how the boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaign and the reality of occupation are highlighted in their viral video, which challenges prevailing narratives. The film informs viewers while motivating them to take action. And the video's worldwide reach reflects Oaxaca's media occupation, demonstrating how grassroots initiatives defy colonial systems and reclaim narratives on a digital platform is an essential tool for comprehending contemporary resistance. Now for our third segment, apartheid in Palestine. In Palestine, the occupation functions as apartheid. Organizations like Human Rights Watch describe the separation of Palestinians and Israelis as systemic oppression, with restricted movements, checkpoints, and land confiscation, which is unjust and unfair, since all movements of Palestinians are simply restricted and limited.
Yeah, and I'd like to add, for example, a recent Al Jazeera report highlighted the bombing of Beit Laiha, where 93 people were killed just in one strike. This is an obvious and clear example of the violent extremes of control in Gaza, which these acts show Quijano's concept of coloniality, maintaining dominance through force and exclusion. Moreover, this shows how colonial systems use violence and evil tactics to suppress resistance and maintain unequal power structures, keeping oppressed communities in a constant state of fear, instability, and silence.
Furthermore, these institutions repress opposition through psychological and physical means. Establishing a culture of terror is just as important as achieving military supremacy. When leaving your house could result in death, how do you resist?
Exactly. So Palestinians do, however, resist through their art, their education, and even their daily activities such as framing or home reconstruction. The human spirit is demonstrated by the verity of resistance.
And the horrific scenes of apartheid in Gaza are best illustrated by the Al Jazeera documentary, which I will play now. And it describes how hundreds of people were killed and thousands were trapped during the siege, demonstrating to Quijano's theory that colonialism is a system of authority upheld by coercion and isolation. This siege is similar to the systematic persecution Human Rights Watch has documented, where a culture of fear is fostered by military domination and movement restrictions. However, as Thad pointed out, Palestinians continue to resist in spite of this persecution, exhibiting tenacity in art, education, and everyday acts of defiance to uphold the eternal human spirit.
So, from Al-Aqsa to Palestine, we've seen how colonial power persists and how marginalized communities such as the Palestinians resist by reclaiming their voices. These stories remind us that liberation is not just an idea, it's about real people fighting for dignity and self-determination, people looking to gain their right backs and overall just get justice.
It also has to do with solidarity. The conflicts in Palestine and Latin America are not unique, as we have seen. A worldwide system of tyranny and resistance binds them together. By spreading these tales, we are taught to act as well as to sympathize. And and that is the end of our podcast. Thank you for listening, and I hope you appreciated it. We're thrilled to welcome Nancy Sarsour, a Palestinian woman who has endured and opposed the ongoing struggle between Israeli and the Palestinians. Her narrative and voice offer a distinctive perspective on the relationship between female resistance, colonial authority, and the effects of apartheid on individuals. We'll explore her struggles, her experiences, and how resistance turns into a way of life while under occupation. So, could you please describe a specific instance that best sums up your time of living under occupation, and what impact has that had on your identity as a woman from Palestine?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me first, and thank you for your efforts in shedding light on the struggles of the Palestinians and struggles of getting their voice heard. So I was born and raised in the occupied Palestine. As a young kid, you don't really materialize the effects of occupation on you personally and on the people around you until something so traumatic happens to you as a child, and then you kind of
Like look back on it.
you look back on it and it kind of solidifies the idea and the presence of the occupation for you as a child. So for me, the most memorable experience that I had as a child that put the occupation in perspective for me as a child was a night where everybody was sleeping. All of a sudden we hear knocking on the doors and they tried to break in. It was my grandma and myself living in the house.
They being the Israeli government?
Yes,
Or the Israeli
the
police?
Israeli soldiers. They came in, we opened the door. It was very cold outside. They were looking to arrest young adult male adults or male children. It was just my grandma and myself in the house, but they didn't believe that it was just us in the house. They had to tear down everything, open every drawer, flip every mattress, open every door, break every glass, and all that was done while we were standing in the cold in the middle of the night with no jackets, no shoes, nothing. And we had to watch. We had to watch them do everything and pretend that they're looking for, somebody on the run when they, in fact, did not have anybody in mind. It was just a form of humiliation, and there's nothing we can do about it. It was traumatic because after they were done with our house, vandalizing the home, breaking everything, they did the same thing to our neighbors, also elderly couple whose kids were outside Palestine. They were already overseas. They couldn't get to the door in time to open.
No, I don't know. I don't.
So violently knocking on the door, and
No, I don't know.
the Israeli soldiers broke the glass, tossed a tear gas bomb inside the house,
Not cooked,
which ended up killing our neighbor and the child. Well, and you see this, and you just know in your mind that you're not in a normal situation as a child, like the normal children in the world who don't have to fear when they go to sleep that they may be awakened by these soldiers who cannot or don't discriminate between young, old, man, woman, children. They're just there to put fear in your heart and humiliate you.
Do you think the whole community really comprehends what Palestinians go through, given the popularity of campaigns like boycott and the sanctions? And what information concerning the occupation would you like to see shared with those outside of Palestine?
Um,
Like, do you think they know what's going on to an extent?
I think now Palestinians are being heard more than ever. If you had asked me the same question a year ago, I would have a different answer for you. But right now, the injustice is being heard. The new generation understands. They're educating themselves. Even some older generation who had their mindsets seeing this genocide unfold, they are, debunking these false narratives and kind of helping us as Palestinians get our voice amplified through non-Palestinians, even through Jews. There are Jews for Palestine, for the liberation of Palestine, who stand shoulder to shoulder with us and try to get our voices heard because they are so against what's happening. So I think, yes, our voices are being heard, not as much as we want them to, but it's getting there. And yes, divestments and boycotting and sanctions, yes, they work. They work. We've seen them. We've seen the effects of that on McDonald's. We've seen it on Starbucks. We've seen it on Coca-Cola. We've seen it on companies within Israel. Hundreds of companies have shut down in Israel. We've seen them worldwide where people are putting a stop to importing Israeli products, and all that is working.
It's not too little too late, though. Do you think
it's never too little too late? It's never. Everybody's voice can make a difference.
And one misconception or like commonly like something that is a little bit under the radar is when people say Israeli-Palestinian war when
Yes,
it's not a
it's
war.
not a war, but it's a genocide. It's a war when you are
Two equal fighting
in terms of resources, in terms of military strength, in terms of money, in terms of everything. This is not an equal-sided war. This is definitely a genocide, and we are seeing this electronic genocide unfold right in front of our eyes. And unfortunately, although, yes, we're talking about the voices and how people are shifting their views on the Israeli-Palestinian situation, but there's more that can be done for sure.
And this more is the government, end of the day, because they're the ones.
Absolutely.
They're the ones that
I feel like if you remove the government from this and their altruistic goals, it's all about power. It's about this. If you remove that, we had this way before the 1948 Nakba. Palestinians and Jews lived neighbors. They coexisted. It's greed. It's got other governments' hands being put, where there shouldn't be, and it's affecting unfortunately, the population of both sides.
And what did I say? Like I'm not one to push my perspective without seeing it from another side. If there was a extreme Zionist that would completely disagree with our point, when you look at the the passing of laws in the government, how it's usually just the US that opposes,
Yes, the
then
vetoes.
then you
Yes.
yeah, that vetoes whatever ceasefire, whatever laws is trying to get passed.
Yeah.
Then you see, like, first of all, what is the United Nations for if not to uphold these policies?
Mhm.
If the US can just veto whatever. But at the same time, when you see every other country voting for these things and it's just the US that isn't.
It's because it is in the US's best interest that this continues to happen. The US unfortunately has other parties playing a role in what they control. So it's not really, I don't think it's who's behind the American people. You have to see who are like the APAC. They're the ones with the money. They're the ones with the the demands. They're the ones who give the yes, give the no, give the green light, red light. Basically controlling America like puppets. So this is being unfolded in front of the the Americans, and they see that. They don't like it because everything that could be put into America in terms of resources is being funneled to Israel to fund this genocide. They are opposing it because there's no money for healthcare. There's no money for infrastructure. There's no money to control this homeless situation.
And we're seeing the direct effects of that with the death of the CEO.
Yes, the
If
CEO.
if not directly connected, like
It's every piece of this
all plays into
one way or another into
like the
each
detriment
other.
of society, or like
Yes.
the negative effects that it has on society.
Absolutely.
You spend all your funds on a
Yeah.
war that's
Look at
that's not worth
education
fighting.
is crumbling in the United States.
On
Kids.
genocide.
Huh?
I was correcting myself.
Yeah, look at the education. You're building homes. You don't have the infrastructure to support this growth of housing. And yet we have a housing crisis at the same time. We have a homeless crisis. We have a healthcare crisis. We have a drug crisis. Everything. So America has to look deep within themselves and really justify to the American people what they're doing. And there's no way of justifying this.
And the American people won't feel the need for justification unless it is brought to the forefront of their minds that there's an issue.
And yes, and it is affecting them directly. So I think it is
Something
weighing heavy on them, and they're starting to see it.
There's something behind this that everyone can get behind in terms of taking action, whether it be the conservatives and whatever they want to get passed or funding towards.
When you see other countries like Israel have free healthcare, right? They're pouring money into their education, into their the next generation. And you look within your own country, who's sending that money to them to allow them to obtain free healthcare, and you yourself
don't have it
and can't afford it. What does that tell you? So yeah.
Thank you, Mrs. Nancy, for sharing your story with us. Your words remind us of the strength of the human spirit and the power of resistance. It's true that they encourage us to realize that solidarity involves more than just hearing, it entails action. We hope that your story encourages our audience to think critically and back to the struggle for Palestinian rights.